Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, Iowa soccer supporters. I'm Ben Brackett alongside your Soccer Talk co-host, Blake Sievers. Blake, what's up?
Not much. Another pod, getting down to the end of the high school season. Loving it.
Titan Tacticians here with us as well, the Admiral of Analysis, Matt. Say hey, Shaggy boy, how are you?
I'm good, Ben. How are you?
I'm great.
Get rid of
Thanks
these
for asking.
these canned, who cares really? How are you? You're gonna say actually not very good. I'm running late.
Well, he's just mad.
No.
You're mad because I showed
I'm
up
actually
late?
going after the Admiral here a little bit. How are you?
Well, I wasn't late. I was on time.
You
I'm
were,
like,
but why do you? I just don't like these all.
Well-
Oh, let's be polite. How are you? I'm good. How are you?
To be fair, I was the latest
all
one
right,
here
so I just
today,
get a little
it's fine.
annoyed every time you call me by my nickname, so I give you a short response.
All right, let's get to it. You listen to us bigger.
That's about as real as I get. It gets free. Is that better, Stevens?
You gotta speak in the microphone.
Yeah, I like it.
All right. So a little tension here in the booth, the layer, if you will. We are here today to talk about game of the week from last week, which was, are we calling it a Southside Derby? Because I mean, it's kind of not, but there is a good little Dowling Catholic supporters group on the south side of the city. But then they played against Lincoln, the Rails there, coached by Joseph Thunrath. And I'd like to say it was a good game on Saturday night, but it was a tough one to watch. No.
Yeah, I think
if
it was
you were maroon-
interesting.
If you were maroon, it was probably real nice.
Yeah, it was interesting because Joe used to coach at Dowling back when they were state title champions way back in the day. So I thought that was kind of a cool little storyline that we didn't really talk about. But I mean, we talked to Jackson Teeling at halftime, which there was it's a challenging game for everybody to get up to, I think, because Sub-State's been announced. There really wasn't much pop from in the game.
Well, so if you really want to hear about the game, check it out on Iowa Catholic Radio. Yours truly was on the mic in the booth with Ben Teeling. I was subbing for Tanner Kraus, who's usually subbed by Charlie Bales. So I was subbing for Charlie Bales. I was third choice. But if you want to hear all the details, they were there to be had. And the first half was not terrible. Let's talk about the first half a little bit. Wow, I'm getting bad looks from that. This is a good shout out for our YouTube, so you can see me ask a dumb question and see the way that Matt and Blake both look at me. Check us out on YouTube. You can also check us out at KIF Soccer on Instagram and Twitter. You can also hear Blake's phone ring at KIF_soccer on Twitter.
So the good thing about the first half was that it was only 2-0 to Dowling at the end of the first half. I think that's the positive takeaway for probably Lincoln. When we got there, we were kind of like, oh, they're kind of hanging on, because quite honestly, I expected Dowling to win big, but that was a positive takeaway for them. I think for Dowling, then they were just kind of like, they were a little frustrated that it was only 2-0, and Teeling's interview kind of reflected that. But you know, it's a little bit unfair, I think, to players to expect just tons and tons of goals in the first half of the game. The game is usually blowouts. It happens where, you know, the game doesn't really open up until that first goal or second goal comes through. And so clearly taking a 2-0.
That third goal was the demoralizer.
Yeah. And then it became 4, 5, 6 and ended up 9.
So I don't know about you, Blake, but always growing up, I was told first 5, last 5, each half are the most important of the half. And that was clearly not something that they've talked about, or is it just something that they failed at?
I think they talked about it. I think they just unfortunately failed. And ultimately, right, there was definitely a gap in ability. And at the end of 80 minutes, it shined through.
I mean,
Yeah. Shown.
Lincoln got beat by a far superior team. That's what happened.
Yeah, and so it was funny. We were looking at the GoBound as .com as we were reading it out, and so like in that ranking system, Dowling second, I believe, and Lincoln is 63rd, and that's through all classes. So that means they're like halfway down in the middle of the 3A class, basically, or maybe at the bottom of the 3A class as far as number of teams. So they've obviously had a tough little run. They're a young team, and they're not a bad team. They struggled.
Yeah, I don't think Lincoln is not a team that's made up of bad players.
No,
There's some very, very talented players in that squad, but I mean,
all over the field.
Yep, and in their entire school system, as we'll talk about here in a few minutes. So the gap is not the actual individual talent, it's everything else that goes along with it. And I guess we don't have to beat the dead horse again because we talked about that in the last podcast, but you know, again, there's a lot of spillover. I think the results you saw on Saturday night was not just a bad performance. It was not just the result of a bad performance. It wasn't the result of bad players. It's a result of their whole season and how it kind of went along with the ineligible players and trying to figure out how that mix works. And as I said in the last podcast, I think the coaching staff at Lincoln has been met with a near impossible task this year with all the ineligibility people. And I know that we talked to Joe a little bit about it after the game, and even we've been talking to him all season, but it's a bigger picture approach, certainly for them. And it's coming time, I think, for the Lincoln squad to reflect back on the year and start to make some positive long-term changes. Because I think the future could be very, very bright for Lincoln. That Joe's definitely the right coach to lead him into that sort of next phase, but there's going to have to be some major shifts, I think, in how Lincoln and those players go about their business.
Well, before we go into more of that, let's talk a little bit about Dowling, Blake. Who did you like on that Dowling squad?
I mean, it's your typical same boys we saw earlier in the season, right? Like we were talking that Goodrell, like we saw him from lane 8 last time when they played Johnson early season, and we actually saw him from lane 1 on Saturday night. Like,
I mean, you got
he
a
is
little closer.
yeah, the boy's a monster. Yeah, we definitely got
There's a
closer.
track that goes around the field.
Gradell,
Yeah, whatever.
Yeah, correct.
I mean, he's like imposing actually now. I like him. I mean, Barca's really good. You got the Mendez.
Yeah, Mendez is quite good. And then you had Fernandez, the other striker. He had a hat trick. Josiah Crowder had a hat trick. So you had some it was a good attacking performance from Dowling, and we had a little conversation with Coach Jackson Teeling just about, the other version of that game is they still batter them, but they walk away and it's like 3-0 or 4-0 or 4-1 or something like that, and you go out of off the game into the locker room and you're frustrated with your team because they're just not clicking it. It sounded like some of the guys that he's trying to get into the form that he wants them into going to sub-state. It seems like this was a good little exercise for him.
Yeah, I mean, how often do you see it? The superior team only comes out 1, 2, 3 goal winners, and they actually put their stamp on that night and took care of business. So he's got to be thrilled, especially with his new boots. He's got to be thrilled after that.
Oh, new there, but they are nice.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, it's 3-0 win in soccer is an absolute massacre, in my opinion. So to have the expectation that 3-0 wouldn't be good enough, I think probably is reflective of
my point is the chances that they had a chance. They could have scored 15 goals in that game. At least they walked away with not at least, but they walked away with 9.
No, what I'm saying is I think that reflects where Dowling sees themselves this year in the season. They're just like, look, 3-0 wouldn't have been good enough for us. I think that's a big point because 3-0 would be an absolute right?
Absolutely.
So it just shows that they're expecting to win the whole thing this year, which is awesome.
Yeah. And if you talk to him, Coach Steeling is very much he's actually quite nervous for the sub-state because he just knows anything can happen, and the standards they need to get to state. Once they get to state, he's not nervous, but before that, it's just like, hey, you've got 2 kind of weird games. Like you never know what's could happen. Like they played Lincoln the other night. Lincoln plays Waukee, and who knows who wins that game, but like if they were to see Lincoln again, or Waukee's perennially a good team, you never know what could happen. So for them, it's all about getting back to county, and it seems like that's kind of the theme with a lot of these teams is it's just get to county.
Yeah. All right.
On the head there.
Well, it is, except that I think if you've had the number 1 spot at any time in the season, like probably not, right? I mean, I think for any team who's secured that number 1 spot, which Dowling had for at least a couple of weeks this season, probably anything less than a championship is, I mean, something below that fell below your expectations, because
they'll
you
be
secured that
disappointed.
number one spot.
Yeah, they'll be disappointed.
But I agree, it's all about going to state and this and that. I'd love to see a team, maybe this is a challenge for Dowling. When you actually qualify for state, don't celebrate it. Celebrate when you actually win state. Because you should be in the top 8.
Well, and before we move on to the next topic, I was talking to someone totally unrelated to soccer, and they were just like, "Oh, you're like in the thick of it now." And I was like, "Well, yeah, the state tournament starts tomorrow." And I said it before I even thought about it. But tomorrow, Tuesday, is the first day of sub-state, which is basically the beginning of the state tournament, right? Like sub-state and state are the same thing. So like you guys all qualify for sub-state, like celebrate when you get to the end, not when you're like halfway there.
Yeah,
Okay.
totally. And
Okay.
if you're one of the better teams, the first 2 games of sub-state, so to speak, there's some tough brackets, but a lot of
There-
times those are should-win games.
There are some tough brackets, but and we're going to talk about this. This is a little teaser, right? So
There you go.
ahead.
Because I don't think there are any tough brackets, but
I think
Oh.
there's at least
it's
one or
opinions, right?
two.
Game of opinions.
So why don't you go ahead and tell them what we're
So we'll just next pod, we'll talk about
game of the week this week. Sorry, guys.
we'll talk about
You don't have to be
sub-state.
checking your shoulder.
There's not any good like competitive games yet, which is we'll
Well,
talk about
and-
that next
and This
time.
has a lot to do with like season's over. Everybody has their seed and they're moving on. Like I that's something they got to figure out, especially with technology and the ability to just like pump out a schedule and like.
That's
figure
on
out-
my list for next
Okay,
time.
so
Yeah, big
we'll
topic.
We'll get back to that. So let's just before we move on, because there's not, when it's all said and done, like we can talk about how good Dowling was and some of their players there, and we can talk about how bad Lincoln was on the day. I also got some great players though, whatever, right? But really part of why we chose this game in particular was because of the program that we've been working on the South Side for the elementary schools that feed into the Lincoln High School, section of the district, if you will. So, Blake, do you want to?
I would just say the one thing we talked about, right? The challenges they can have. So I think the question is, all right, kick it forward, guys. How are you helping solve the problem?
There you go.
Right.
So
We picked
how
out the
are we-
problem.
how-
How are we solving it? Here's how we're solving it.
All right, Matt, you want to
Yeah.
overview?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, and a lot of credit goes to Joe for leading this on to the kind of the opportunity and kicking this off. But Joe reached out to us 8 weeks ago and said, "Hey, there's the program I kind of ran in a couple of years ago where we just had a little league for the elementary school leagues. Would you guys be interested in kind of taking the reins and running with it?" And we said, "Yeah, absolutely." So we have run a 6-week elementary school league with
8-week.
8-week elementary school league with 10 schools that feed into Lincoln High School. It's been absolutely fantastic. We have had a lot of really good success. So we ended up starting to work with a guy named Lonzy Range. Lonzy runs a sports performance company out of Urbandale. And he has managed our entire program. He's done an awesome job. The Grandview men's soccer team has given us 20 of their players to coach. And so we've assigned 2 coaches to each team. And so those guys have been coming out to practice twice a week and leading practices for the elementary school league. So it's been really, really great. And they've done an awesome job.
We got 25 kids participating at every school, and in most cases a wait list, in some cases a wait list up to 75, 80 kids that want to participate in the after school soccer club,
Right.
which is pretty sweet. So in theory we had, like by the numbers, 250 kids participating all spring in this program.
Yep. And then this past weekend was the way to cap it off. And so we had a 4v4 tournament out at the Lincoln Stadium field where the teams came in and were able to play 4v4 against each other. So it's been a really great program. I think it's been a good experience for us because I think we identified a lot of positives out of the program. But in my
Before-
mind, there's a lot of
Positives. You should quick shout out for our social media. Check out our stories on Instagram, especially. We had some hilarious interviews with students and some really nice interviews with coaches and people that were around. The
activity
students,
directors and stuff.
yeah,
like that.
exactly. But the students were, they were over the moon for the program. They were having so much fun, and it was just you can tell in those interviews, right? Like absolute blast.
Yeah, there were a couple of them that really sort of stood out.
Yeah.
One of them was the interview with the squad. I think it was Wright Elementary School with their coach, Jace. Who's
No, that's
Grandview
Jacob
guy?
Harvey.
With Jacob Harvey. So it was just It was not planned at all. And Ben just asked the guy, so this is your coach, what do you think of this guy? And they just loved him. And they turn around, they're doing these like special handshakes and stuff like that.
Well, and they were like, what I said, what do you guys do at practice? And they were like, passing, dribbling, shooting. We just really love our coach. Like unprompted. It wasn't like, do you like your coach? It was like,
yeah,
I mean, it was so cool.
right. So that was great because I think a big part of this program is number one, get the kids engaged in some sort of school programming or extracurricular programming that they enjoy. So I think we check the box there. To give them a good mentor, so they start identifying with good role model. I really like the idea, or I like the fact that Grandview came in. These are student athletes in college that are getting an education using soccer as that vehicle, and so now these elementary school kids have a college soccer player and coach also to look up to as their role model. So that checks the box there, and then the actual relationship between the coach and the player that made him feel good was really important too.
And the Grandview players are a pretty diverse group too, and I was struck by that. Very, very obviously, like it was a very diverse group of people throughout that whole stadium. It was so great. But like, if we just had a whole staff of just like white kids that grew up in the suburbs, I don't think that tracks the same way that like that diverse group from Grandview does.
Right. Yeah, I agree with that. I think that was certainly helpful. So, for me, the whole idea of this program too is to say, all right, if things are kind of aren't going the way you want them to the high school right now, if the kids aren't showing the priorities in school at high school level, is there a way we can start to work on that and instill those values in them when they're younger and earlier? And that's the whole point of why we were involved in this. I hope that we're able to be continuing to be involved because I see that I think there's a number of things we can still work on, even though the program was good. Some of the, just to reflect back on the program, I think just some of the issues that we're facing are just showing up on time, being punctual. I think that's something that,
it's like a staffing issue, right? Like it's just getting people that get it.
It's getting, like, for example, like we didn't start the games for like until they were an hour late because there were people that were showing up late. Now, I understand that they're elementary school kids that need transportation, but there's a way to talk to the kids about showing up on time. That's going to be really important. We talked about some of the issues just related to the stuff we ran with Lincoln, showing up on time. If you're not going to show up on time, communicate to someone why you're not. I think that's something we can work on. And then there's just other stuff too. We had, I don't know. In the event too, we had, first of all, Lonzie did a great job organizing it and stuff. We had quarterfinals and semifinals, and we ended up, somebody was kind enough to donate vouchers or something like that. And so we had food and stuff like that. But the vouchers got passed out in the middle of the tournament. And so you can imagine what happened with a bunch of elementary school kids that effectively ended the tournament.
Free hot dog where?
Yeah. And the kids went running for a hot dog, which was fine. But like, I think those are other things that we can talk about, even with 7-year-olds, 8-year-olds, and 9-year-olds. You stay committed to your team, you finish the game, and then you go eat, and we have to serve some breakfast before the games. That's fine. But I think those just little things like commitment for your team, make sure you finish your business before you stuff like that, showing up on time. Those are things that I think are going to translate to hopefully as they get older. And I came up with something actually that I think we should implement in the fall, because you said what? The behavior, academics and grades.
Correct.
So I think the acronym is
attendance. Academics, attendance, behavior.
So I think the acronym is BAG. I think of a school bag.
Okay.
And I think of like filling up the school bag for these kids.
So B is behavior.
Behavior, right?
A
so
is...
you get your behavior points, you get your attendance points, you get your grades points, and you see like, who ups their school bag. And I just think, I honestly think, maybe we'll talk about it, but for kids that want to participate in this program in the fall, there should be some requirements on that, just to give them a little bit more accountability and responsibility for those things. But again, like, and then we talk to the middle schools, the high schools, and say, hey, is this a good idea? How do you guys want to tweak this? Or is this a good way to start changing things a little bit, or forming your expectations at young ages? So
I think that's the key, setting the expectations, setting the habits for the young kids. I mean, my kid's in 3rd grade. the number of kids on his soccer team that say, my mom forgot my bag.
Yeah.
My dad forgot my ball. My sister didn't bring my water. And I said, it's not their stuff. Like that's little stuff, but trying to set a little bit of responsibility. So when they do become freshmen, sophomore, juniors with Joe, like he doesn't have to worry about all these things that.
Right. Does your son understand the concept of being on time?
Well, yeah, because he's Blake's son.
I'm just saying like that 7 or 8 year olds understand that, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And so if like next time, if we start the tournament on time,
Sure.
regardless of who's there,
And yeah, you
like
miss out on
someone's
first
going to
game.
turn around their dad and mom next time and go, I was late. I can't be late this time.
Yeah.
And you understand things happen, right? Some parents are bringing one kid.
Sure,
So literally everybody's got the communication. Everybody's got the email on the phone. Hey, we're going to be 10 minutes late. Nobody really cares why. Okay. That's fine. Adjust.
Yeah. How often do you get that from just like, even as a, right? Like somebody says like, hey, I'm gonna play and give you an excuse. It's like, yeah, I'm gonna be 10 minutes late. Like, great. Now I know I can use my time differently while I wait for you.
For the kid, it was show on time with a picked up soccer ball.
Yeah.
And of course, if they don't have a soccer ball, then we give the soccer ball being this is the job.
The coach the pump, and guess what, coach? We haven't started yet. I need my ball pumped up. No problem. We'll help you out.
It's setting those standards, and I think the idea from what we're doing is to we're working in elementary schools there, 3rd to 5th grade is what this program is for. And then you've got middle school where we're trying to build mini pitches and they've already got a middle school soccer program where they have a season and the whole deal at the end of the year. And in theory, like they're prepared to participate as high school soccer player as a freshman. They understand that they need to fill up their bag, right? They have to behave, they've got to attend school, and then they got to have good grades. And it's not even like it's not good grades. You have to have grades, you have to go to class. Like they're all like literally all those things. If you behave, you'll probably attend class. If you attend class and you behave, you'll probably get good grades.
Right. Yeah, I mean, misbehaving is not attending class, right? At the level. So
Yeah. No, and
Well,
so
like
that's where we want to get.
Remember that analogy? One of the schools used, if you like, and this is legitimate, real.
Yeah.
If you pick your friend, you don't go to kick your soccer ball at the end of the day. Which, guess what? All of a sudden, behavior is flipped because they loved just going out to play a couple times a week for an hour.
Yeah, the smiles and the laughter on this kid's face is incredible. I walked from my house to Lincoln, it's about a mile away, so I could hear the kids from a block or two away. And we got close to the station. It was awesome. And so, of course, I mean, they're not going to give up those smiles for a couple of objectives before they actually get to do that.
Yeah, I think just the short of it is, right, like we recognize that there's a bigger issue at hand, and I think we're doing what we can. But I think we would if people have better ideas than we do, we'd love to hear them.
If you want your school to get involved, we talked to one couple of people on the weekend at the game.
Yep. We'd like to get this throughout the rest of the Des Moines public schools, but again, there's a lot of school districts around central Iowa that could benefit from a similar program.
Yeah, 100%.
Remember,
I'm looking forward to just the feedback too from the schools and the activities directors and stuff like that. I mean, we did not run a perfect program. We had obviously a couple of issues. I think as all programs have. So yeah, I mean our tasks now, and I'm looking forward to is how do we make it better? And I hope DMPS and these Lincoln schools want to continue to work with us, because if they do, I think we're in.
I think we found with all of those partners in Des Moines public schools that they're there for it. So
big shout out to Teeling and their AD Tom Wilson. They worked with us
they did
to do some cool things. It didn't end up transpiring, but for a bunch of people that are outsiders, for them to open up their doors and give some opportunities was awesome.
Yeah, that was super generous. So just put it out there. I mean, no kid showed up.
Yeah, so the idea was that the kids would show up to the festival during the mid-morning, whatever, go home, get a little rest or whatever, and then come back to the game and see the Lincoln team take the field, like see what it's like, see where you could potentially get yourself. And unfortunately, we didn't have any people make it out that way, but I mean, again, learning experiences for us, and there's probably some reasons, but at the same time, it probably also ties to the same kind of conversation we're having, where it's like, I mean, there were kids that we interviewed that literally were like, yeah, I'm going to the game tonight, I can't wait.
Yeah. Well, so we had about 150 kids in the morning, 0 at night. I mean, clearly there's the disconnect, right, between the families that have young kids and the Lincoln High School team. There's
Yeah,
no,
I mean, and
there's
you-
no one that said that I want to
would be
make
the-
that a part of my schedule to go to the game.
Blake would be
but-
the first person to tell you that too, right? Like, how often do you go take your kids to something in the morning and you have plans later in the day that just don't come to fruition?
Yeah, I mean,
Does it happen?
I mean, if
Not
if you say you're going to the game, like again, like I understand things come up, but
Not-
well, I think they knew that. I think they knew it wasn't going to be a good game. Right? Like,
that could be.
Yeah, but I mean, let's be honest about it. I mean, I think that's part of like the whole conversation, right? Like, you gotta just own where you gotta own where you're at in life. And like right now, Lincoln is not as good as Dowling, and the fan base understands that, sees that. They didn't come to the game for whatever reason, and that's okay. I mean, but like, how do you, again, if you're a student athlete and you're not getting grades, how do you expect fans are going to show up to support you? I think there's a huge disconnect there. Now, I'm not saying that's actually the reason why I didn't show up. I think that there's lots of different reasons, but there's clearly a disconnect, which is, I think, why like I'm excited to work on it. I feel bad saying it because I don't feel bad saying it, but I mean, I know it's like,
I don't think you should feel
just
bad.
kind
I
of like
just
a
think
tough truth.
it's
But
just one, yeah, exactly. It's one of those things that we're trying to do here. It's none of this is meant negatively. It's a little critical, but we're here for it, right? We're here trying to make it better, and we'll take suggestions, and like I don't know.
we can take the suggestion to butt out if you'd like us to, but
well,
I just
less fun.
yeah, no, but I think it's been super enlightening. It's been a really good experience.
Great. I mean, I don't trials, great run. We just did it, a couple weeks notice, and now you can build on it.
I mean, yeah. If you hear this and you want to affect it at all, we're having some conversations this week to try to keep it moving in forward direction. So let's leave it there. Not belabor the point. Good game from Dowling the other night. Lincoln, best of luck in your sub-state here. I hope you guys can come together and get yourselves through the next round and give yourselves a rematch with the Maroons. No offense to Waukee, because we love you, Waukee, as well. But sub-state starts tomorrow. Tomorrow is May 16th, I believe.
When will this be posted? That's gonna be the question.
We're gonna have to talk to Ethan about that. But let's assume that it's posted soon and sub-state starting, the state tournaments in action. Blake, how does that make you feel?
Good. I gotta run.
Let's just keep talking so we make
That's right.
Blake late.
It'll be awkward and when it just cuts off.
It's his computer, isn't it?
All right. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you for a sub-state preview or something like that.